We're turning now to interview. I mentioned we had a guest joining us by phone, or he's going to be on screen in a moment. This is Daniel Wass. He is actually a former kind of anti-gun guy, and now he's a very strong pro-Second Amendment guy. He's the author of two books, Good Gun, Bad Guy, Behind the Lies of the Anti-Gun Radical, and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, Destroying the Anti-Gun Narrative. He has a blog, goodguybadgun.net is his website, and I believe we have him online to talk with us right now. Hi, Daniel.
Hey, Debbie. Thanks for having me on your show. I've been looking forward to this, and you're doing a fantastic job. Keep up the great work.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm so glad you can join me today. Well, I want to just jump right in and talk about and just get into the heart of things on this gun control issue. You know, as I was walking in the studio today, there are televisions, big television screens up, and they're showing damage from the hurricane in the Bahamas. People see damage like that, and they say, the government has to do something, and all they can think of is, and the left thinks of, well, must be a climate problem, must be the oil company's fault, it must be fossil fuels. They want to find a target and blame that person, and then go after legislation to show to the people we're doing something about it. Well, it's kind of the same idea with these horrific shootings. We had a recent, as you know, one in Texas, around the country. There have been several horrific shootings, loss of innocent life. The people's answer in part sometimes is, just do something, government, just do something. I'm afraid, I want you to fix this. Let me just start with an overarching question. For you, Daniel Wass, former anti-gun, now pro-Second Amendment guy, in light of what has happened, have you heard in this country and the advocacy by the left to, in some way, increase gun control, are there any proposals floating around out there that you think are good and necessary and vital for us to take in order to try to limit or reduce the number of these horrific shootings?
No, because all gun restrictions are a restriction on the rights of people, and they put good people in danger. Gun restrictions, I have yet to see one gun restriction that didn't meet three simple criteria. Number one, it can't violate the rights of good people. Number two, it can't put good people in danger. And three, it must prove to save lives. I've never seen one gun restriction that did any of those. They all restrict good people, put good people in danger, and give the bad guys more leverage, because the bad guys don't pay any attention to gun restrictions.
You know, that was one
So
of
my short answer is no.
Okay, I like that answer, but that's great. So I've had this discussion with many women, because I will say I think women more than men, especially if they have no familiarity with guns, they and their husbands don't hunt, they don't shoot as a sport, so they don't really have familiarity with guns, and they hear about these horrific instances, and they say, can't we at least keep the guns out of the hands of dangerous people? Which gets me to the first thing I want to run by you. So President Trump is allegedly considering a proposal that was, the one characterization of it was the social credit scoring system. Essentially, President Trump is apparently entertaining the idea of going along with some kind of social credit scoring with information produced by Amazon, Google, and Apple devices. So the devices that already spy on us and we don't like it, but those entities gather mountains of information about individual private citizens. And the idea is apparently being floated by these three tech giants. Maybe the president should consider having legislation or backing legislation that would say, you know, let these tech giants assess your personality, decide how dangerous you might be, decide if you're exhibiting tendencies toward future possible danger, and let that scoring system impact whether you have the right to buy a gun. What do you say to that, Daniel Wass?
Well, who do you want? Who would you want determining your mental stability? You know, this is the problem. You know that these policies, if implemented, would be abused. And you know, the idea that President Trump is even considering something like this may just be to accommodate the anti-gun crowd for now. You know, some of the things that he's done and said scare me, although I supported him, and I believe he's doing a great job on so many levels. Some of the gun stuff he says really scares me, but I do have a feeling that some of this is really just to accommodate them for now. he's a strong Second Amendment advocate and supporter, and I hope he stays that way.
I do too. I will say in this one, I agree with you that, first of all, it's interesting. He's such an interesting president because he doesn't have a political background. He hasn't been in Washington for years. He doesn't have tons of connections with all sorts of different political types. So people are flooding his office, flooding him with ideas. We had this discussion during the healthcare battle where he didn't have a lot of policy depth on healthcare. So he listened to one person, another person, another person, and eventually kind of we didn't get Obamacare repealed. But back to the gun thing, I think he does try to have, I have a sense about him, he has a fair-minded idea that you should kind of listen to people, see what they're proposing, process it, and so therefore you're seen as someone who's not just blindly dismissing or blindly marching down the road the NRA says to take, but instead you are thinking. So I think that could be right. But tell me I want to elaborate a little bit on the danger of this idea. You were talking with this idea of the social credit scoring. These big tech giants are liberal. They think the Tea Party is crazy.
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, but no, exactly. That's the point. These would be abused so quickly if they're not already, spying as it is on us right now. And we see the way the left and these organizations try to eliminate the conservative voice on social media. You can bet that they would jump all over this if this was an actual policy that was put into place and violate the rights of good people. So, the whole problem with this, Debbie, the whole thing is that the left is constantly focused on guns, and that's not even the problem. I say it all the time. There's no such thing as gun violence. There's human violence that the left refuses to look at. They won't even entertain the thought that violence can come from a human being. Because when you look at the violence that comes from people, you start to look at what caused them to be violent. And we'll start to look at things like open borders, sanctuary cities, these crazy gun-free zones that they create, rampant pharmaceutical drug use. The list goes on of things that cause human violence. But why does the left not want to ever look at those things? Because they're the culprits in creating the policies that create this type of environment. They don't want you looking at the policies because they're the ones who back them and support them. They'd much rather have us looking at guns and helping people believe that guns are the problem. Guns aren't the problem. This is a human violence thing. And until we get to the causes of human violence and start working on those issues, we're always going to have this problem.
Absolutely true. And, it's very interesting because yesterday we had in the show, we were talking with an expert who was describing these problems in large public schools and the effort to have racial equity in imposing discipline. And it's easier for the federal level under Obama and yesterday the case happened in Minnesota, but the governments to say there must be racial equity in terms of discipline among the various races and ethnicities in the student population, which ignores the real problems of school discipline, the causes of the school discipline problem. So back to this issue. Yeah, back to this issue in guns. Number one, it's an easy and gut level reaction of the left to say, well, obviously it's a gun problem. Take the guns away because that's an easy thing to argue. We can write a piece of legislation that's going to say this is outlawed, this is outlawed, this is outlawed. They appear to be doing something, but as you say, never getting to the real problem. Another core issue that relates at least to the young shooters, the shooters in high schools, that many of them, I've forgotten the numbers, but very high percent come from fatherless homes. They're kind of lost. They have this opioid or other drug use. They're not mentally stable and first of all, they're going to pursue guns anyway, even if you say try to prevent them. But their behavior was caused not by the gun, but by all the problems that we don't want to talk about.
Right. And you can take away the gun and that behavior doesn't change. That behavior will act its way out with a knife or with a car or a bomb or anything else. So, but you got to remember that the left really wants to get rid of guns. And because they believe that they could have this government-controlled utopia. They really do believe this. And, they don't believe in the Bill of Rights like we do, primarily because these are God-given rights, and a lot of them don't believe in God. So the Bill of Rights becomes invalid.
Absolutely true. And it's interesting you talk about the Bill of Rights and the where this idea of gun protection, the right to own guns, come from. There was a big interaction between our great state of Texas Senator Ted Cruz and this actress in Hollywood whose name Alyssa Milano, I think her name is. But she was saying, what are you talking about? A God-given right to bear arms? Show me where that is in the Bible. And great Ted Cruz said, I'll show you what it does say, which is you have the right to defend yourself and your life. The Second Amendment's guarantee of the right to own a gun, and that was guaranteed by it was spelled out by the Supreme Court in the Heller decision that Second Amendment actually means the individual's right to own a gun is an extension of or an implementation of your right to defend yourself.
Yeah. And you know what, when we talk about God-given rights and all this stuff, I'm not the most religious guy. I never have been, but I understand there's a higher power. And the thing that people on the left are being taught on a daily basis is that there isn't. And that, but see, people, we tend to have this tendency that we want to gravitate towards something bigger than us. And when God is taken out of the equation, where do these people go?
Government.
They go to government. Yeah, exactly. So this is a big part of the problem. This is why the two ideologies are like, oil and water. They don't mix.
Right. Three other points I want to get to, I always point out I grew up in upstate New York, so I can talk really fast. But one issue was that there is rarely discussion about the number of times, the percentage or the value of the idea that guns actually protect lives. They save lives. They're used in a variety of circumstances to stop a shooter, to stop some other violent incidents. Never gets discussed because that makes the left's argument to take guns away from law-abiding people less palatable. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought about that, about the value of just gun ownership to save lives.
There was a CDC put out a study that they tried to shelve for a long time because they didn't want the results getting out. What it produced was the fact that 2.46 million times per year, almost 2.5 million times per year, guns were used to save lives. And that doesn't necessarily mean good guys killing bad guys. It most often meant just the mere presence of a gun would deter a bad guy. And 46% of those situations were women being able to defend their own life. So the statistics are on our side, but the left doesn't want to hear it. So guns are used 2.5 million times in America per year to save lives.
Absolutely true. I want to run through some ideas. There's a gentleman named Daniel Horowitz for the Conservative Review. I love this guy. He's been on our show before. He's always doing, 10 point, 7 point, 6 ideas kind of things. He has 7 ways for conservatives to counter gun control with criminal control. And he's really, his premise, just from the title, is instead of controlling guns, taking guns away from law-abiding people or making it harder for law-abiding people to get them, let's change some laws that may make it harder for criminals to commit crime, or when they do commit crime, put them away longer. I'm just curious, very quickly, what you think. Do you like the idea of increasing mandatory sentencing for gun felons? Do you have a thought on that one?
I'm fine with that. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Actually,
the bad guys should be prosecuted, but the problem is the left doesn't want to prosecute them. But go ahead.
Okay, how about actually making mandatory minimums mandatory? All these mandatory minimums that the judges have leeway to not follow. So do you like the idea, as a Second Amendment advocate, do you like the idea of when you use a gun to commit a crime, having serious criminal penalty attached and mandatory sentences attaching?
Yes, we're not here to defend criminal behavior. We're here to defend rights of good people, law-abiding citizens. So yes.
Okay. Oh, I forgot to send you this. We emailed ahead of time, and I forgot to send this one thing I found. But one of the suggestions Daniel Horowitz has is about the idea of allowing good guys to carry everywhere. And Daniel Wass, did you see this story out of the state of Maine? They passed in 2015. They passed a law essentially saying that everyone that you're permitted to carry, you didn't have to get a license. You just were permitted. It was an open carry law. And since 2015, or actually they call it Universal Concealed Carry Law, since 2015, their state statistically has become the safest state in the nation for crime. Why do you think that was?
Yeah. It's also called constitutional carry, and there are 18 states that I think that number's right now because it changes, but I think there's 18 states right now as we speak that are constitutional carry states, which means you have the right, and they recognize that right to carry a gun. And like you just mentioned, those states and those areas where there's more concealed carry, there's less crime. It's a very simple notion that the left just doesn't want to see. Where there's more gun restrictions, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., there's high numbers of crimes because good people can't defend themselves and they're helpless. Where Robert Hyland said, I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. Robert Hyland said, an armed society is a polite society. And it's true because
Yeah.
you wouldn't try to commit a crime on someone, take a violent act on someone if they have a gun on them. It keeps people nice.
Yeah, well, we're here in the great state of Texas, where, as they have said in movie lines, even my florist has a gun. I mean, many people carry here, and it's assumed that they will. And you made a point earlier I wanted to go back to. You were talking about the idiocity of these gun-free zones in public schools, and they are just an invitation that the mindset of the left is we'll make the schools safer by saying they're gun-free zones, but the fact is it invites violence because if you're planning to do something, nobody there is going to be armed. You want to comment on that?
I'll comment with a question.
Okay.
On what planet does it make sense to bus hundreds of children into buildings all across the country 5 days a week, keep them in the buildings for 8 hours a day, remove all forms of protection, armed security, remove guns, and then post signs on the building that say, everyone in here is unarmed and helpless? These are the most ridiculous policies, and they're the things. That's why I mentioned earlier, one of the things that the left supports and creates. As a matter of fact, in New York, Governor Cuomo just removed even the possibility of teachers having guns. He made it law that they can't have guns. But that's another whole story. But they create these policies and they put children in danger. And then they stand on the graves of those kids and they use those deaths to push for more gun control. This is a sick bunch of people that we're dealing with, and they need to be run into the dirt.
Okay, I'll hit two more quick topics. One is in the city of San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors, I believe it's called, recently designated the NRA as a terror organization. Mind you, this is a country where we can't yet designate Antifa as a terror organization, Muslim Brotherhood as a terror organization, but the city of San Francisco, now it has no legal impact, but it's just a signal. The NRA is a terror organization. Is that crazy or what?
Well, this is the stuff I talk about in Good Gun, Bad Guy. I talk about the propaganda, the terminology they use, the fear tactics, and this is just another way of demonizing the NRA. The NRA's got a lot of issues right now, and I hope they get through it and get it all worked out. But in the meantime, the left-wing gun grabbers, they see blood in the water, and they're attacking on every angle now possible. And it's really a sad thing. The NRA is not putting, like, I read a quote too here, and I don't know if I can find it here real quick, but this woman, Catherine Stefani, she says the NRA is putting weapons in the hands of those who would harm and terrorize us. Well, sorry, the left is the one doing the terrorizing with their fear campaign. They have this anti-gun fear campaign, and they're perpetuating it every single day. So it's just ridiculous propaganda.
Absolutely it is. I'm going to hit one last topic. You write blogs, which are great. And again, I want to make sure you get to say the name. You have a website. But you had a piece out about the American left was attempting to suppress one of the avenues they have. They say, well, why wouldn't anyone, why wouldn't this new law be a problem? And their idea was to suppress suppressors, the things that make guns quieter when you shoot them. And so that was one argument they're making. Well, somehow if this will help in gun safety if we ban suppressors. And you had quite a take on that. So I'll let you tell our listeners what's wrong with that idea.
Well, first of all, suppressors help protect the hearing, our eardrums. They help they help us when we're at the range because it's loud. It can be loud and it can damage your hearing. So suppressors are good. The left wants to make them into these scary, things. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make people who don't know any better believe that if people have suppressors, they're going to be out there, killing people on a daily basis, and in nobody's going to be able to hear it. Nobody, yeah, in silence, exactly, in silence, and nobody will know. And so it's more of their fear campaign. Suppressors aren't bad; they're good.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to tell our listeners you write really well. You have great stuff. I downloaded both your books today on my iPad. But the website is goodgunbadguy.net, right?
Right.
Okay. And people can go to your website, read what you have to say. I mean, and they can buy your books. I guess I got mine on Amazon, so you can get them on Amazon. And I just want to draw people's attention to what you're doing, what you're writing. So is there any other information about how people can find out what you think?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And had I known, I would have sent you a copy. I didn't, I didn't want you to. I'm happy to send you one. Anyway, Debbie, thank you for that. And they can go to goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com or find it on Amazon. And yeah, you're right. I'm writing for a lot of different publications right now, and AmmoLand and Reactionary Times and just like Western Journal, all sorts of different publications. So you can find me on Facebook. My name is Dan Wass, DanWos, and on Twitter, and I'm all over social media, speaking on radio shows, in great shows like yours every day, all across the country. I'm doing all sorts of media. So, and I'm not done talking. I have another book coming out in December. So.
Okay, then. Daniel Wass, thank you so much for joining me. It's great talking with you.
Thanks so much, Debbie. Right.
Okay, folks, bye-bye. I'm going to wrap up this one other thing on the Second Amendment before I turn to our last topic today, and that is this. There was a Supreme Court decision that said there was controversy for decades about whether or not the Second Amendment actually was intended to have the individual right of an individual American to own a gun, or many anti-gun people were arguing it's not really there. The Second Amendment is not there to guarantee the right to own for individuals. It's about militias. Was it a wartime thing? And I want to just make 2 points about that. One is the Heller decision. The United States Supreme Court made very clear, not only they didn't concoct this out of whole cloth, they actually went back and looked at what the amendment was intended to do. It is intended to be a guarantee of the right of individuals to bear arms, to own weapons, and keep them in their homes. So the standard is that the Second Amendment, like all the other Bill of Rights, are intended to be a very firm promise from our founding made to individuals. But the reason for the Second Amendment, and this is the second point I want to make in closing out this gun discussion of the Second Amendment and all the impending legislation. The purpose of the Second Amendment is not just to allow you to own a gun in your home so you can defend your family or defend yourself while you're out in the world, or to even because you like to go hunting or because you like to go shooting and you like target practice, whatever kind of shooting you like. Those are all things you do with your gun. But the purpose of the Second Amendment is to retain the balance of power between individuals and the government. It is one of the many paths by which the founders intended to help prevent tyranny from developing in this country. It is about the balance of power between the people and the government. And speaking with Daniel Wass, we alluded to this, but many tyrants over the decades and centuries have taken away the rights of individuals in their countries to own guns, because this leaves the citizens helpless, powerless. They cannot fight back. This is what's happened in Venezuela. The people are left with the government forces out in the streets, sometimes shooting at them, and all the Venezuelans whose guns were all taken away by the socialist government are left with the possibility of throwing rocks. Throwing rocks. That's about what they can do. This is what tyrants do. They take away guns. Venezuela, Germany, Russia, and much of Western Europe is largely disarmed. Australia is largely disarmed. So the idea that that the Second Amendment was rooted in the idea of keeping a balance of power between the people and the government, has great historic precedent and great importance. I have a bunch of clips. I was going to read a bunch of quotes by our founders. I've run out of time to do that today. If you're interested, I can email them to you. You can email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. I'll give you this list. But the founders knew what the purpose of the Second Amendment was, and it was not to be sure that we had enough guns around to be able to keep ourselves able to go hunting and to defend ourselves in our homes. It had a very serious, woven in, tied into the founding idea of America, that we're going to have limited government and that power resides with we the people. And that, my friends, is the entire story I want to talk about today. It's going to be a big story. Going to watch what President Trump does, watch other gun-grabbing advocates of the American left. We had Beto O'Rourke. Actually, we have a quick clip, I think, the extremely wonderful producer, Matt. This is Beto. This is a Democrat presidential contender. I think he's actually polling at 0. I'm serious. I think that's what it is. So he's not really going anywhere. But he's talking about, oh yeah, you're going to be forced to sell your guns back to the government. He had other quotes, similar nature. This is a gun grabber guy, and this is when I say, back to the start, my first 5 today, that freedom is on the ballot this time. Freedom is on the ballot around the world. There is an uprising of the people, a demand for freedom, a throwing off of the elitist ruling class, a determination that we, the people in this country, we hold the power. We are not going to let the ruling elites in the American left to start down the path of reparations and redistribution of wealth and taking away our guns and destroying our border and taking complete control of our healthcare system. All the things the left intends are all designed to crush your freedom. And that's what's on the ballot in 2020. Sovereignty, the existence of borders, the power of our country to be an independent country, a sovereign nation, that's on the ballot in 2020. And part of the gun issue is very much tied to that. The idea that the Second Amendment is there to allow the people to have a balance of power, to understand, as against the government, understand the government can't take all the weapons away, especially if we end up with another left-wing government like the Obama administration that weaponized numerous agencies against the American people. The IRS, the FBI, the Department of Justice, weaponized against the American people. Those are not the people you want deciding whether or not you have the right to be armed.